Capcom is cooking. We may not have gotten an announcement at the Game Awards for the eventual Resident Evil 9 and the various Resident Evil remakes that are currently being worked on, but the future of Capcom is looking more epic than ever, as not only do we have Monster Hunter Wilds releasing this coming winter, but also Capcom just announced a brand new Onimusha game looking fan-freaking-tastic utilizing the RE engine, along with perhaps the most hype announcement of the night in an Okami sequel in active development. Capcom has taken a huge interest in breathing new life into some of their most classic franchises, and the resurgence of these two franchises, along with their continued work on their big headlining ones, has absolutely solidified Capcom as one of the greatest developers in the modern era. So slash that like button if you're as big a fan of Capcom as I am, and let's dive into everything we know about the upcoming Onimusha and Okami games, along with what we currently have going on with Resident Evil. Let's first get into Resident Evil before we jump into the huge Onimusha and Okami sequel announcements. While 2024 was quite the silent year as far as Resident Evil announcements, we do know that Capcom is currently working on more Resident Evil remakes, and with big leaks from series insiders suggesting both Resident Evil Code Veronica and Resident Evil Zero remakes are in development, even more remakes of the earlier post-RE4 Resident Evils could likely be announced in the coming months and years as Capcom gears up to celebrate Resident Evil's 30th anniversary in 2026. In addition, the next mainline entry, Resident Evil 9, recently announced its game director in Koshi Nakanishi, the director of Resident Evil 7, to helm this next Resident Evil game. Likely to release later in 2025 or in 2026, this ambitious game has been leaked a lot over the years, so go ahead and view the video at the end screen of this one to see a complete history of Resident Evil 9 and everything we know about it from the several years of leaks. So while we haven't heard much in an official capacity about what's coming next as far as Resident Evil is concerned, 2025 is going to be a huge year of Resident Evil announcements pertaining to its future games and its 30th anniversary coming up. So just rest assured, Capcom is cooking with Resident Evil right now. Alright, let's now get into everything we know about the upcoming Onimusha game, titled Onimusha Way of the Sword. This classic samurai game started all the way back in 2001 on the PS2 with Onimusha Warlords, and received a number of sequels in the following years, with a remaster of the very first game launching in 2018. And while the fixed camera angles and stiff controls of the prior games may leave some prospective players hoping to get into the series with some hurdles to jump through to fully grasp how great these games were when they released over 2 decades ago, this new reimagining of the series is taking the franchise in a new direction with its focus on full 3D action combat, more akin to the fast, precision-based combat reminiscent of FromSoft games like Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, or the recently released Black Myth Wukong. This reimagined Onimusha looks like it will demand players to master precise attacks and parries, dodges, and demand tactical awareness to overcome swarms of the Genma, the iconic enemies of the series. While we pretty much only have the game's debut trailer to go by, Capcom did drop a very brief press release for the game that sheds some light on the game's setting and premise. Onimusha Way of the Sword is set in Kyoto during the early Edo period, a time of relative peace in Japan's history, when the city suddenly falls under a dark curse brought forth by a plague and a siege of demonic Genma. Amidst all the chaos and turmoil erupting from these events, a lone swordsman wielding the Oni Gauntlet is the city's last defense against total destruction. This trailer showcases how much more fluid and dynamic the combat appears to be over the original game's mechanics, and although we don't know how much of the earlier game's DNA will be brought over to this new game, we do see the protagonist wielding the series' signature Oni Gauntlet while engaging in some intense sword fights with supernatural forces. While the appearance of the protagonist in this trailer has some similarities with Samanosuke Akechi of the first game, Capcom hasn't yet disclosed who exactly we will be playing as in Way of the Sword. Onimusha Way of the Sword represents the first game in the series since 2006's Onimusha Dawn of Dreams, so this is a really big deal for a franchise that was quite popular in the early 2000s but has since been completely dormant. Capcom is releasing this upcoming game in 2026 on the PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC, a full 20 years after the previous entry, and as Capcom's 10th best-selling franchise, one that has sold a combined total of 8.7 million units since June of 2024, Capcom is likely trying to go hard with this one to revitalize this once successful series, having it compete against the likes of some of today's most acclaimed action games like Sekiro, Lies of P, and Black Myth Wukong, to name but a few. Let me know what you think about this game in the comments, but holy heck man, I'm beyond stoked to see Capcom revive the series and usher in their own take on the increasingly popular action genre. I would have freaking died if they also announced Devil May Cry 6 at the Game Awards, but hopefully Capcom has plans to make that game in the near future. But even while we wait for 2026's reimagined Onimusha game, a sequel to a game many of us never saw coming came out of nowhere towards the end of the Game Awards. This game being a sequel to the beloved Okami. Now, many of you younger gamers out there may not even know what the heck Okami is. Maybe not even some older gamers, as it took the greater part of a decade for this Zelda-like action-adventure game to even cross the 1 million units sold mark, even with its numerous ports and HD remasters following its original 2006 release on the PS2. Fun fact, in March 2009, the game was named the, quote, least commercially successful winner of a Game of the Year award in the 2010 version of the Guinness World Records Gamers Edition. However, over the nearly 2 decades of re-releases and remasters, the game sold a rather impressive 4 million copies as of June 2023, so perhaps Capcom and the original director, Hideki Kamiya, thought they'd pour their hearts and souls into a proper Okami sequel to see if the series would fare better in the modern day. It seems like they are attempting to do just that, as original director Hideki Kamiya and several members of the original staff in their newly formed studio, Clovers Inc., not to be confused with the original Clover studio that created Okami, are co-developing this brand new upcoming sequel, along with M2 and Machine Head Works, studios who helped bring the classic PS2 game to HD. According to Capcom's website for the sequel, Okami 2, or whatever it will eventually be called, is set to be a brand new adventure with Amaterasu in the same vein as the original game, so expect that picturesque cel-shaded art style full of brush mechanics, classic Zelda-like puzzle solving and progression, and frenetic combat, all wrapped up in a mythological Japanese setting that made the first game so memorable. Although we did get a spiritual successor in Okamiden released on the Nintendo DS, this upcoming sequel sees Amaterasu's return in all her radiant glory, and I cannot freaking wait. Capcom states it will be some time before we see the game again, but just the confirmation that this project exists is a surreal moment for not just fans of Okami, but for the entire industry. I mean, we've got artsy games out there, right? But Okami is just so beloved and has such a passionate base of fans, and while there may not be tens of millions of us out there that played the game, the commitment to make a proper sequel out of a game that severely underperformed shows that Capcom is willing to make fans like me happy over making an insane profit. Just like their commitment to the Onimusha franchise, the Okami sequel is proof in the pudding that Capcom is one of those rare developers that has a proven track record of making some exceptional games in the modern era that doesn't mind taking big risks with their older franchises to see if they could succeed in the present day. We're all really lucky to have Capcom here, and their continued excellence in their Resident Evil, Monster Hunter, Dragon's Dogma, and Street Fighter franchises, to name but a few, makes me think that both Onimusha and Okami have incredibly bright futures ahead of them. So let me know down below which Capcom games you are looking forward to in the future, and go ahead and find me over in this video as we go over absolutely everything we know about Resident Evil 9. That's all I have for you in this one. Happy holidays everyone, and I look forward to seeing you real soon in the next video.